So we're in Pirkei Avos chapter 4, and we're starting with what I have as Mishnah Yud Aleph, Mishnah 11. And the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yonasan Omer, Rabbi Yonasan says, Kol hamekayem es haTorah me'oni, anybody who fulfills or upholds the Torah out of oni, out of poverty, sofa l'kaima me'osher. In the end, they'll fulfill it or they'll uphold it from wealth. One who fulfills the Torah in or from poverty will, in the end, fulfill it from wealth. B'kol hamevatel es haTorah me'osher, anybody who nullifies the Torah from a situation of wealth, sofo levatla me'oni, in the end they will nullify it from poverty. And a simple reading of this Mishnah seems to be saying that if a person is poor, is on hard times, but yet they still persevere and they fulfill the Torah, then they will be rewarded. That they will be, in the end, they'll have the opportunity to fulfill the Torah out of wealth. They'll be rewarded with wealth. And the opposite, if a person nullifies the Torah out of wealth, in a situation of wealth, then they will be punished. And in the end, they'll have to experience poverty. The difficulty is that we don't necessarily observe that in our lives, and that's the very first thing the Midrash Shmuel brings up is that we Hare Anu we see numerous people that fulfilled the Torah in poverty, and that's how they fulfilled it their whole life, and they never reached that state where they were now wealthy. And the same is true for the opposite. You have wealthy people who don't fulfill the Torah and they remain wealthy and they don't end up poor. So, how are we to understand this Mishnah? So, one possibility he brings from the Abarbanel is that, okay, it's true, we don't always observe this, but this is the rule. And when we don't observe it, those are exceptions. And the rule is the general truth, the general outcome of somebody fulfilling the Torah in a situation of poverty will be that they will eventually be rewarded with wealth. Now, you don't always see it because there's all kinds of cheshbonos, of calculations. God has his ways, God has his calculations. We don't always know what they are. We don't know why a person is experiencing what they're experiencing. And it could be there's other reasons why they're not deserving to reach that point of wealth, and that's why we don't always observe it, but the rule is the rule, and the exceptions are the exceptions. That's essentially what the Abarbanel answers to that question. But the Midrash Shmuel himself says, well, perhaps we just have to read the Mishnah a little bit differently, or not necessarily at its most straight face value. Perhaps, he says, Efshar Lomar, we could say that it's talking about two different worlds. It's talking about this world and the next world. One who fulfills the Torah in this world, even though they are challenged, they have poverty, life is hard, but in the end, they will fulfill it in the next world with great wealth. They will be rewarded with great wealth in the next world. Now, what does it mean to fulfill the Torah in the next world? So he quotes an idea, which is not to be taken literally, but that in the next world, the tzaddikim, the righteous, they sit and they study Torah, and that's what it could mean. Now, whenever we say the next world, we always we use that term freely. There's many things that the next world can mean. Sometimes people use it to mean the times of Mashiach. Sometimes people use it to mean the Olam HaNishamos, the world of souls. Sometimes people use it to mean following resurrection, when the soul and the body are reunited. So he doesn't get into that, what it might mean. And when we say that they're learning Torah in the next world, there's different stories in the Talmud. In the Gemara, it refers to the Mesivta Derakia, the heavenly yeshiva. that seems to be in the world of souls, which once we're talking about a world of souls, we have to understand that it's a spiritual concept that we're putting physical words to try to describe it. So it's not an exact description, but there's some sense of continuing to fulfill and study Torah in the next world, even as a soul. And the Mishnah tells you that if one pushes themselves to fulfill the Torah in poverty in this world, they'll be rewarded in the next world. They'll have great wealth, great reward in the next world, and they'll continue to fulfill and study the Torah there. Well, the opposite is true, that if one has it good in this world, they are comfortable, and yet they don't take advantage of that space, that freedom of movement, that leisure to use their time and their resources to be able to study and fulfill Torah in this world, then the next world may not be as rewarding as one would hope. So that's his first suggestion to answer this question, that at the end of the day, we don't observe necessarily that people who fulfill the Torah in poverty end up wealthy. Well, it's not talking about wealthy in this world, it means wealthy in the next world. Alternatively, he says that it's not talking about material poverty and material wealth, but rather it's referring to intellectual poverty and intellectual wealth. A person, not everybody is as brilliant as the next person. And a person may not be as sharp as others, may not have as great of a memory, may not understand things as quickly as others, may not have as much knowledge of Torah, but yet they do what they can. Person does what they can. They work with what they have, the level of intellect that God imbued them with, the amount of knowledge that they have. I don't know every halacha in the Torah. I don't know everything, but I'll work with what I have. So a person is mekayim, they fulfill the Torah out of poverty, so to speak, even though they don't have so much knowledge, but they try, they do their best. So the Mishnah says Hashem will reward that person and will help them fill their knowledge, fill their understanding, make them wealthy not in material but in intellect. And in the end, if a person pushes themselves when they don't know as much, when they don't understand as much, then Hashem will reward them and imbue them with greater knowledge and understanding, and they'll be wealthy in knowledge. They'll fulfill the Torah with a wealth of knowledge. And he quotes the verse, Reishis Chachma, Yiras Hashem. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. If they have fear of God, they have awe of heaven. They might not know everything, but that's the beginning of wisdom, and that's the path to wisdom. On the other hand, the opposite is true too. A person is very wealthy. They're brilliant. And they've studied Torah, and their knowledge is extensive. And God forbid such a person doesn't fulfill the Torah, even though they know everything. They know so much. So then they will forget their knowledge. They'll forget their learning. And that's the opposite side, that a person who nullifies Torah, despite their intellectual wealth, despite their knowledge and understanding, so in the end, they're going to be poor of that knowledge and understanding. They're going to forget their Torah. So I think, that understanding is very important and very inspiring, that we don't always know everything. I think we can all say that. We don't know everything. We all have different levels of understanding, different abilities to remember things, different background, different training, and the Mishnah tells us that we have to keep trying, and if we do, then Hashem will help us. Hashem will reward us and give us that knowledge. Okay, another explanation could be that when it says mikayem es Torah, so likayem could mean to fulfill, it could mean to uphold, it could mean to uphold like to support. And so it could mean that a person supports Torah despite that they're poor. They don't have so much. Person is not the biggest gevir. They're not the wealthiest person. It's not easy for them to support Torah causes, but they do, and they sacrifice to be able to support Torah causes. They are mikayem es Torah meoni. They uphold, they support Torah out of poverty or with less. So there, Hashem says, "I'm going to reward you with wealth." And he quotes the verse, "Eitz chayim hi lamachazikim ba." The Torah is a tree of life for those who support it. That by supporting Torah, we're given life, and in this case, the Mishnah seems to be saying, according to this understanding, we're rewarded with wealth. That when we show Hashem, when we show God that we take the resources He gives us and uses them for good, so Hashem rewards us with more resources, or perhaps we can say He makes us His treasurer to distribute those resources because He sees that we're reliable in terms of spreading those resources of giving tzedakah. If we even give tzedakah when we don't have so much, then Hashem says, "This is somebody who I want to be my gabbai, the one who gives out the tzedakah. I'm going to reward them with greater wealth." And but on the other hand, the opposite again, if a person has wealth and instead of using it to support Torah causes, they waste it away, and as a result, Torah learning is nullified. There can't be as much Torah learning because person chooses not to support Torah causes. So then, they will lose their wealth. So if a person doesn't show that they are reliable distributors of the blessing Hashem gives them, then they won't be able to be the treasurers for that wealth. So okay, so far 3 explanations, kind of 4 actually. The simple reading in the Mishnah: if one fulfills the Torah in poverty, they will be rewarded with wealth. And even though we don't always see that, there are always exceptions, but that's the general rule. That's just the simplest reading of the Mishnah. Number 2 is that it's this world versus the next. If one fulfills Torah in poverty in this world, without much, even though they don't have so much in this world, but they'll be rewarded with great wealth in the next world, and they'll continue to fulfill and learn Torah in the next world. Number 3 is the poverty could refer to a person's intellect. Maybe a person is of lesser intellect, they don't have as great a memory, they don't know as much, they don't have as strong a background, but they persevere and they push through and they say, "I'll do what I can. I'll fulfill the mitzvahs that I know how to, and I'll abstain where I know that I'm supposed to abstain." So that person is rewarded with a wealth of intellect. Hashem will assist them in gaining the knowledge that they need to fulfill more Torah. And 4th, the word mikayem can also mean to support, and it means somebody who supports Torah even though they don't have so much. Hashem rewards them with wealth that they'll be able to continue to support Torah. Okay, now this Mishnah raises for us just an interesting question, and I don't think there's one answer to it. It's probably depends on the situation, but is it easier to fulfill the Torah in poverty or in wealth? Which is easier? A person is poor. Is it easier for that person to fulfill the Torah? Or is it easier if a person is comfortable and wealthy to fulfill the Torah? And like I said, I don't think there's a clear answer. Each one comes with its challenges. And the Midrash Shmuel cites both perspectives. He quotes from Rav Moshe al-Mushnino one side of the coin, and then he himself says that he thinks it's maybe the other side. So Rav Moshe al-Mushnino says that the Mishnah is telling us, the Mishnah is implying that it's more difficult if a person's poor to fulfill the Torah. They have stress, and it's a challenge to put food on the table, and their mind is on the worries of supporting their family, and yet they dedicate themselves to learning and fulfilling Torah. Despite that, so so that person, um, despite overcoming the challenge of poverty or of having less, they fulfill Torah. So in the end, they'll be able to fulfill it out of wealth. And he says, um, second. Yeah, so the words read very carefully, may only, from poverty. So it doesn't say in poverty, it says from poverty, which almost sounds like because of the poverty, because of the challenges. So if a person, so Ramosha Moshnino says that the Mishnah is saying if one fulfills the Torah because of their poverty, meaning you would expect that because of their poverty, somebody wouldn't fulfill the Torah. Life is so difficult, life is so hard. Who has time to learn Torah? Who has the headspace to focus on the mitzvos? But despite that, instead of that being a reason that they don't fulfill Torah, but instead they take their life situation and they use it in order to fulfill the Torah. So then they'll have the opportunity to fulfill it in a situation of wealth. But um, if a person is the opposite, they are mevatel Torah because of their wealth. They nullify Torah because of their wealth. So in the end, they'll nullify it out of poverty. And so this understanding assumes that it's easier for a wealthy person, a comfortable person, a person who doesn't have as much worries about supporting themselves and their family. It's easier for such a person to fulfill Torah, and the Mishnah is highlighting. But if somebody is able to fulfill Torah even despite the difficulties, so that's especially praiseworthy. In the end, they'll be rewarded with wealth. That's the perspective of Ramosha Moshnino, and and he says based on this that therefore one can make an inference from the Mishnah. The Mishnah says if one fulfills the Torah out of poverty, they'll end up fulfilling it out of wealth. What if a person fulfills the Torah out of wealth? Then do they get more wealth? Like what? So so he says that, well, person's wealthy and they fulfill the Torah, okay, like it's good, it's great, but it's not special because they were comfortable and it wasn't so hard. Specifically, the person who fulfills the Torah out of poverty, that's the person who's deserving of praise and this assurance that they're going to fulfilling out of wealth. The Midrash Shmuel himself says that he thinks that one can say the opposite. That, on the contrary, challenges cause a person to fulfill the Torah because they humble us and we don't have as many distractions. While a person who's wealthy, so they have all kinds of other things that they can be doing that can draw their attention away. Vacations and fancy dinners and all the things that can draw a person's attention away from fulfilling Torah, studying Torah. It's more challenging for the wealthy person. And he mentions a verse that says Yizal Mayim Midalyo, which I think literally means like that water will flow from the bucket, from his bucket. But a dal is also a word for dal. Really means like somebody who is dependent. A bucket hangs. That's why it's called a dal. A dal is something that's dependent, that hangs. So dal also means poor, and he says that water flows from someone who's poor, meaning Torah can flow from somebody who's in difficult straits because they're humbled before God, and as opposed to somebody who's wealthy might become arrogant over it, and arrogance leads to kind of not leaving room for God in one's life. So So he says that really fulfilling Torah in when one is poor or has difficulties, that's easier, so to speak. And but the Mishnah assures us that such a person, once they've done that, even if wealth comes their way, which usually challenges one's ability to fulfill and study Torah, they'll still be able to do so. They'll be able to continue. So, Kol HaMekayim as a Torah Meoni, one who fulfills the Torah in poverty, when it's easier, they'll still get the opportunity to fulfill and they'll be able to overcome the challenges of wealth. On the other hand, one who nullifies Torah out of wealth, again, because it's challenging, they have that's those added challenges of distractions. So even if they come to a situation where they have less, um, it will now be more difficult to fulfill. And he invokes the idea of mitzvah goreres mitzvah and avera goreres avera. One mitzvah leads to another mitzvah, and one transgression leads to another transgression. In other words, I think what he's saying is that, I mean, that's true. That's true on many levels. One mitzvah leads to another, but there's a certain training also. There's a certain accustoming ourselves. And so if a person goes through hard times, and those hard times, they bring them closer to God. So that sets them up for success, really. And even when they're no longer in hard times, they will continue on that path. While a person who is very comfortable and they kind of forget about God in their life, then even when they fall on hard times, it might be too late in a certain sense. They I don't mean it's actually too late, but too late in their minds. They've strayed and they've veered, and it's hard to come back sometimes. So okay, so I think it's just whichever way of those we understand it, it's a good question to consider, an important question, and both sides of the coin are true in different situations, but it's good to be mindful, right? Sometimes when things are going smooth in our lives, then we forget to turn to God, and we we're distracted by the good times, and we wish good times on everyone, but we have to be careful to use good times, to use if our headspace is clear and we don't have worries. Okay, great. So that's a time that we can focus on spiritual growth. While while if somebody's on going through more difficult times, so that also could be used for aliyah, for growth. That could be used to humble ourselves before God and to submit ourselves before God, and also could be used for growth. So both of these considerations, both of these are true in different instances. Wealth could be a catalyst for growth, being comfortable, having things going smoothly, being thankful to Hashem, and difficult times could be a catalyst for growth. And we hope for the good times to be the catalyst for growth, but when a person goes through difficult times, also those can be used for growth. Okay, so that's Mishnah Yud Aleph. Mishnah Yud Beis. Rabbi Meir Omer. Rabbi Meir says, this is Mishnah 12. Have a memait be'esek v'asok b'Torah. One should limit or lessen their engagement in business, and busy oneself with Torah. V'have shvar ruach b'fnei kol adam, and be humble before all people. Okay, does one have to do with the other, right? Be engage but little in business, according to this translation, and busy yourself with Torah, and be humble. Okay. V'im batalta min Torah, and if you neglect Torah, if you nullify Torah, opportunities for Torah, yesh lecha b'telem harbe kenegdacha. You'll have, here they translate, you shall have many who bring you to neglect it. Literally, it means like you have many b'telim, many things that cause you to neglect or nullify it. before you. The mamalta b'Torah, but if you toil in Torah, yesh lo schar harbe litin lach, you have much reward to give to yourself, or that will be given to you. Okay, so kind of three parts to this Mishnah, I'd say. The first part is limit oneself in business and involve oneself in Torah. One. Number two, be humble. And number three, if one nullifies from Torah, they have many nullifications in front of them, many things that will cause them to neglect Torah. And on the other hand, if they toil in Torah, then there's much reward that waits before them. Um, so, so first of all, the second half of the Mishnah at least ties us back to the previous Mishnah, because in the previous Mishnah we wondered about, well, a person who fulfills Torah, they'll end up in poverty, they'll end up with wealth. We said we don't always see that. One answer was in the next world. They'll end up with great wealth and reward in the next world. So this Mishnah, at least in the second half, in the end, it says Imam Alta b'Torah, if one toils in Torah, yesh lo schar harbe litin lach, there's much reward that waits for us. And the word yesh, actually, the Midrash Shmuel points out, the word yesh, which means there is, it could be used specifically here, because there's a verse, I think it's in Malachi, but I don't remember offhand. Maybe it's Tehillim. Lahanchel yesh, that I will reward those who love me with yesh. With yesh means like with things, with something. That's a verse that mentions a reward that awaits those who love Hashem, those who bring themselves close to God, and and so there's an idea in the sages. Yesh is 310, Yud and Shin 310, and the Gemara and the Midrash talk about how there's 310 worlds that await us, whatever that means. There's some reward that relates to this word yesh. So here, yesh lo sachar har be'elitem lacha. There's an illusion here that yesh waits for us. These 310 worlds of reward await us. But I also want to just point out, and Midrash will discuss this later, that it doesn't say if one acquires great knowledge in Torah. It says if one toils in Torah. And the Midrash Shmuel says that sometimes we toil and we just don't get it. We don't understand. We try so hard and we still don't understand. We don't come away with the knowledge. But Hashem sees that. And actually, we say it after, when we do a siyum, celebrating a completion of an area of Torah, we say, Anu amelim u'mekablim schar. We toil and we receive reward, which means just for the toil itself. The work we put in to our Torah study, to our learning, to learning how to be better, how to do mitzvos. So all of that Hashem sees, and all of that is rewarded. All of that brings us closer to Him. And it's not always about the knowledge that we acquire, it's about the work that we put in. So if you, Imam Malta, the end of the mission says, if you toiled in Torah, so then there's much reward that awaits you. Now, just turning back to the beginning of the Mishnah. So Rabbi Meir said, "Have a memayit be'esek v'asok b'Torah." So one should engage but little in business and study Torah. So what does that mean? I mean, does it mean everybody should quit their jobs to study Torah? So obviously we need to strike a balance, and we have to do hishtadlus. We have to put in effort. That's how it's been since the sin of Adam and Chava, that we have to put in effort to earn a livelihood. So it doesn't mean to dismiss our livelihood completely. So the Midrash Shmuel says that it could be talking about the way a person's perspective. Person should diminish the importance they place in their minds and hearts on their livelihood versus on Torah. You know, there's a Gemara interpreting a verse that says that the the destruction really of the first Beis Hamikdash came about because we abandoned Torah. And the Gemara says, what does that mean? We abandoned the Torah. It says, Lo baruchu b'Torah tchila. They didn't make a blessing on Torah in the beginning, which the simple reading means is that they didn't. We're supposed to make a blessing before we learn Torah every day, once a day, and they weren't doing that in the times of the first temple. There is another reading of that. Lo baruchu b'Torah tchila. They didn't make a blessing on Torah first. Means when they would bless somebody, they didn't bless them for Torah first. So when we give a blessing to a child, we say you should be zocha, you should merit, or we tell the parents you should merit to raise your child legadolo, leTorah, lechuppah, ulamasim tovim, for Torah, to marriage, and to good deeds. And okay, a whole question about why we say those things, why we say in that order, but Torah is first. Torah is the first thing that we bless. Other people might give a blessing that you should be blessed, that you live in comfort, and you become a millionaire or a billionaire, right? So that's so it's a nice blessing too. Bless somebody with wealth, but it can't be first. It's not. It can't be the ikr. It can't be the main thing. So so the Midrash Shmuel says mimayit be'esek. You should limit your business. He says it should be me'at be'einecha. It should be low in your eyes. It shouldn't be the most important thing. And rather, asok b'Torah, Torah should be the most important thing. You should recognize what is for what. That if we're trying to earn a livelihood, it's to support our ability to do mitzvahs. That's what it's for. That's why we want to put food on the table. It's to be able to survive, but we want to survive to do mitzvahs. That's the placing the what's the primary and what's secondary. And so it's a matter of perspective. Um, Now, then it continues, and it says you have to remain humble. So a person who develops the right perspective might view others who have not developed this correct perspective with disdain. And the Mishnah says, remain humble. Remain humble. Even if we work on ourselves and we grow and we develop the correct perspective, remain humble when we look at other people. Don't disgrace them. Don't mock them. Don't badmouth them. And then it says that if one nullifies Torah, then you have many nullifications in front of you. And what does that mean? So in one interpretation, he says, and this is a very important idea, that each of us influences the other people around us. And when we choose to learn Torah, we'll go to the flip side first. Imamalta b'Torah, if you study in Torah, you have much reward, he says, because others will learn from you. You have reward, he says, even if others don't learn from you, but especially because others will learn from you. People who see that you are involved in Torah study and that you're involved in personal growth and you daven beautifully and right, all of these things influence others. And so if we toil in Torah, then we have great reward on its own, but especially for the way it influences others. But if we nullify Torah, if we don't, so we have many nullifications in front of us, meaning that causes others to not learn Torah. So because we don't influence them positively. So that's the power of the of the influence that every individual has. And actually in the next chapter of Avos, or I guess in the sixth actually, I think. Later in Pirkei Avos, there's a Mishnah that lists 48 ways that one acquires Torah. And among the 48 ways one acquires Torah, it says if one is nosei ba'olim chavero, one bears the burden with their friend. What does bearing a burden have to do with, well, how does that help one acquire Torah? So one interpretation is because part of what can push us to show up to for Torah study, to show up to a shir, to a class, or any other, or to do more mitzvos, is understanding that just our choices affect others. Our choices affect others, and what we do influences others. And we have a burden, we carrying the burden of others, or carrying the burden with others, can mean recognizing that we're all part of a community, and what we do influences others to do it too. And it's part of the burden of community, so to speak, is just showing up. Just showing up itself is influential to others. And that's what he's saying here, that if we nullify, if we're mevatel, we have many betelim, many nullifications in front of us because our actions have a ripple effect and cause others to nullify. So it's a great responsibility that's upon each of us to understand that our choices do impact others. Um, okay. Another way to read this Mishnah, when it says that you should be memayit be'esek, you should lessen your business dealings and involve oneself in Torah. So it doesn't say, the Midrash Shmuel points out, it doesn't say you should only have a little bit of business. Ma'at esek. It says mima'et, which is a verb. It says diminish, which means, he says, that this is a constant struggle, and one has to continuously be thinking about it and kind of cutting back. Now, what that means is certainly a person who like runs a business. So the temptation is to spend all one's time building their business and developing it and developing connections and networking, and it could be 24/7, 24/6 for those who keep Shabbos, right? But it could be nonstop. So you always need to be fighting that urge, fighting that struggle, that temptation to keep pursuing, to keep trying to gain and build wealth. So mimayit means continuously, every day, constantly resist that urge, which means to be thoughtful and to be disciplined and to consider how much should I be dedicating to my work, and how much time do I have to make for Torah study and other important values. And it takes thought, and I think many people get drowned in their work, putting in hours, and the Mishnah is telling you, mimayit, constantly, always, if you don't have a constant focus on cutting back, then it will keep growing. Again, not for everybody, it depends on the situation, but there are many professions that applies to. So, professions that reward you for more time that you put in, right? My understanding in the high tech world is there's different companies have different um, like different methods of operation, but some of them want to keep you at work as many hours as they can. So they give you exercise rooms and laundry and whatever you need, so you never have to leave work. And we have to we have to be thoughtful and mindful to push back on that. Um, and then it says asok baTorah and involve oneself in Torah. Now it doesn't. The flip side of mima'et, to lessen, would be marbeh, increase. So it should have said one should diminish their involvement in business and increase their involvement in Torah. That would be the flip side. But the Midrash Shmuel says that it maybe makes sense to say increase your time, but you can't say one should have only a little bit of business and a lot of Torah. Why? He says because you'll never have a lot of Torah. Meaning, no matter how much Torah we have, it's not a lot. It's never a lot. There's so much Torah out there. This is Hashem's knowledge, this is Hashem's wisdom. Even if we learn a lot of Torah, so to speak, it means spend a lot of time learning Torah, we have to realize that we really don't have a lot. We never have a lot. There's so much out there that it can never be considered that we have a lot. And therefore, the Mishnah says, remain humble. Because realize that as much Torah as one might think they have, it's a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the sea of Torah, and therefore one shouldn't let it become let it get to their head. And but if one nullifies Torah, they have to realize that they're not just nullifying their Torah learning, because it nullifies all mitzvos, he says, because all the mitzvos we do and our conduct and our midos, our traits are all impacted by our Torah learning. So if we nullify in batalta, if you nullify your Torah learning, if one doesn't take the time to learn how to live, then they won't live properly. So it's not just nullifying Torah; it's nullifying all their conduct and their mitzvos in all areas of life. Additionally, he says, and this is very true, sometimes we we need a break, okay? We have to realize that breaks from learning Torah often you have batalta, you nullify, but many nullifications come along with that. Meaning, just to use one example, a person says, I need a break. I'm gonna just check my social media for a few minutes, right? So we know what happens. The few minutes turn into many minutes, and then sometimes for some people into hours because that's how it's designed to take to capture our interest and hold us and not let go. But that's just kind of a more modern day application where it's really deliberate actually to try to grab our attention. But it's true in life that once we begin to kind of allow ourselves to be distracted, then one distraction leads to another distraction, and other things begin to take more importance. So again, each person has to know themselves and know what makes sense in terms of how much time they spend learning Torah, but to realize that one distraction leads to another. In batalta, if you nullify, if you allow yourself to be distracted, it leads to many distractions. And maybe we'll just add one more thought, and then I'll just summarize. The Barbanel says that the Mishnah is actually telling you how to arrive at the point where one can limit their business and increase their Torah. And that is by being humble. Have shval ruach, be humble. Because many times the Mesilas Yesharim talks about this, and it's true, and it's true for almost everyone in society. There are exceptions. Really, like we could live on much less than we do. We set standards for ourselves that are, and every country is different, but certainly in America, our standard of living is like through the roof. It's if we take the time to think about it and compare ourselves to other countries, it's crazy. But we can't imagine ourselves living with less. It's not necessarily because we need to be comfortable. It's more about what will people think of me if I don't live with a certain standard. Um, and and so the the Mishnah would be telling us that the first step is humility. If we have humility, then we won't feel the need to chase after material wealth and comfort as much, because so much of that is not about having, it's about how people look at us. And and that will allow us to limit our how much time we spend on business and turn our attention towards Torah, which you know it's something that's very difficult, and we all suffer from this, and but it's a profound idea. The Mesilas Yesharim talks about this. That Mesilas Yesharim is a work of Musar about developing into one's character. That really we could most people could live with less, and it's a pursuit of honor that makes us want to live at a higher standard, and that's how it is. But the Mishnah is telling us, have ishval ruach, be humble, and if we're humble, if we develop our trait of humility, then maybe we'll be able to relax our standards of living. If we can relax our standards of living, then we can we can have more time for we don't have to earn as much. If we don't have to earn as much, then we have more time for other important things. So just a summary again of the second Mishnah, because we said a lot about the second Mishnah. That first of all, we said that the Mishnah talks about the reward that waits us in the next world, and of Yesh, 310 worlds, whatever that means, but there's the spiritual world that awaits us, and it's for Amalta, it's for toil, that we don't have to have, we don't always gain the Torah knowledge, but if we try, we put in the effort, then that itself is rewarded. We said that some of this is just a matter of perspective. It could be might to lessen our busyness could mean to lessen the primacy that we put on amassing wealth and put the primacy on Torah. Understand what's primary and what's secondary. What is for what? We work and we earn a living in order to be able to accomplish the things that are actually important in the world. What we do affects others. Our choices, ours. If we choose to learn Torah, that influences and inspires others. If we choose not to, that also influences others. And and lastly, we said that it's a continuous. I don't know. But lastly, we say it's a continuous battle. It's a continuous struggle. Every day we have to remind ourselves. Don't get sucked in by the draw of building up business, building up, amassing wealth. Make sure we're calculated and careful in terms of how we use our time. And um, and what we talked about how one distraction leads to another, and how a lack of knowledge, if we know if we don't expand our knowledge, then that it doesn't only affect our Torah, but it affects the way that we live, our mitzvos, and our character. And the one solution to all this is humility. Humility, if we're humble, then we don't see ourselves as needing as much, and then we can be more careful about how we prioritize our time and resources. Okay, thank you for listening. I'm going to look at that question.